of the emissions. So we're talking about a lot of different approaches that we can do for it. So one of them is individual and community commitment. So for education, we want to educate those about the negative impacts of methane on the environment so that we can identify and acknowledge the issue. We can't address the issue if you don't acknowledge it, and you can't acknowledge the issue if you don't know there's a problem in the first place. So that's why one of the most important steps that you can do for it. Oh, sorry, that was methane. Our ops, the ops are doing that. So one big thing that we have for this is our social media campaign called the Methane Mission, which we're going to go a lot into detail about in a bit. But another thing we have is support for climate activist groups. So by volunteering and donating to organizations that are dedicated to climate actions to spread awareness and put pressure on policymakers. So some examples for Canada are Friends of the Earth Canada and Climate Action Network Canada. And a lot of people know about the ways that you can reduce your carbon footprint. There's a lot of websites online where you can calculate your footprint and you can make small daily changes to make an impact. So you can you can also offset your emissions and you can just reduce them in general. But methane is much more potent. I think it's almost 4 times as bad as carbon is. So that means it requires a lot more change in this individual actions that you can take. It requires stuff not just on the micro level, but on a macro level. So the methane mission that we have is our social media campaign. And the main things that are the main solution goals for this is funding. So there's a lot of solutions that we can give, but you can't actually implement them if you don't have the funding for it. So that's why we have our methane mission, so we can raise funding for these solutions. And then we also have education, because learning and acknowledging and addressing is very important. And then we also have for placing pressure. There's a lot of organizations and a lot of solutions that they've shared. A reason why they're not being implemented is because policymakers don't really care. A lot of corporations, they are going to prioritize money over saving the planet. They don't really care about how it impacts people on an individual level. They don't care about how it impacts us in the future because they care about the money they're making now. So we place pressure on policymakers and corporations to make a change, then we will be able to really implement these solutions. So as a part of our campaign, we want to be collaborating with organizations around the world. So enforcing this main goal, organization will put flyers and infographics around in designated areas around the world, and it's up to people to find them and take a picture of them and upload it to Instagram with the hashtag the Methane Mission. In doing so, you not only be raising awareness about the negative impact of methane emissions on our planet by reaching thousands of people across the world, but you'll also be recruiting people to join this important cause and mission in protecting our planet. So doing this too, there's also a little trend that's happening on TikTok where they will post some money that they hide somewhere, and then it's up to the people who are watching to go find where that is. So it's kind of a similar vibe where it's a fun way to get involved, but it's also important because you'll be seeing these infographics and these flyers everywhere. You'll be joining with your friends in doing it, and it'll be in popular places, but also local places too. So it'll be spreading a lot of people. But this is also not enough. So we're going to encourage everyone through our social media campaign to take the initiative and write letters expressing their concerns about the methane emissions to politicians, public policymakers, etc. Making a difference begins with us, if also us as a public, to encourage decision makers to address concerns about our environment, and that starts with methane emissions. So on our social media campaign, we're going to be putting up templates for them, letting them know different policymakers and corporations that they can be contacting about the issue, so we can put pressure on them to actually make a change. So with our scavenger hunt that we have, so the best way to learn is by doing, and the best way to do is by having fun. So by making it a fun little thing for people to do, they'll be learning, they'll be sharing awareness about it, and they'll be helping save the planet. So yeah. Sorry, I'm not done. So the role of influencers, key opinion leaders, and events. So social media influencers and content creators are people who have a large influence on society. So we do know that social media impacts our lives on the daily and a lot, and sometimes in ways that you don't even realize. So we're taking inspiration from Mr. Beast. He has a thing called Team Seas and Team Trees that was collaborative with different influencers and key opinion leaders. So we can host events such as gaming and Twitch streaming platforms where fans can watch creators, and they'll also be getting resources and links to different charities that they can be funding. And gaining support from these social media influencers and the key opinion leaders will be essential to spreading the word around the globe. And we'll be sharing educational resources, posting different articles, blogs, and books and movies so people can learn more and educate themselves. We also have some listed here for you guys. If you guys want to take a look at them, then the first two is Mitigating Methane Film and Last Hours. They're both on YouTube that you can watch. They're less than 15 minutes each. And there's also a little article you can read as well. So we're also going to be giving updates on things. So we're going to be tracking the success of what our solutions are. And we're also going to be sharing important policy updates and changes that are happening. We want to be sharing hopeful updates to people because as much as it is important to share awareness about how this can be dangerous and harm people with methane, doom scrolling and doom posting is going to make people not lose hope for it. They're going to think, okay, it's hopeless. We can't make a difference, so why even try? And that's not what we want to do. We want to encourage people to continue to take action, continue to put pressure. So by posting hopeful updates on different ways that we've been successful, that will encourage people to keep moving forward. And also raising money. So it will be part of our campaign to fund research, scientific research and projects. So in doing so, we can enable the creation of our innovative technology that will not only be affordable, but also eco-friendly. And this will also help fund the rest of our solutions as well. So, but other sources is a small percentage of the problem. Methane emissions is also coming from oil and gas, waste, and agriculture. So we also have some solutions for those as well. So it requires a government and industry commitment. So we're going to be imposing regulations for the oil and gas sector by imposing operational regulations for the faculty facility operators by making them have to follow some guidelines. So some of them is conducting regular leak detection and repair investigations, adopting technologies to reduce emissions, such as replacing devices with air or electric-powered alternatives. And we will also be help funding this through our social media campaign. And we'll also be setting limits on emissions from specific sources. We're going to be imposing a pricing system where we will require companies to pay a price for the methane emissions that they produce. And this will provide incentive to them to reduce their emissions because the cost of reducing their emissions will be less than the cost of paying this price. And we'll also be monitoring, reporting, and enforcing. So they'll be required to report their methane emissions in detail. We'll be monitoring these reports and perform audits just to make sure that we're maintaining transparency, honesty, and accountability. And we'll also perform regular compliance checks to make sure industries are following guidelines. And we'll make these public to also maintain public trust. If you see outside restaurants, they'll have little signs that say like pass, conditional pass, or fail. We'll want to be doing something a bit similar, but it would be for these companies and corporations. And it will be letting them know if they're following and complying with the guidelines that we have in place. So people, if they're buying stuff from these corporations or companies, then they can know if it's something that they really want to support. And we'll also be imposing fines on them if they're not following these. Yeah, so we'll also have agriculture, the sector. So it has a reciprocal impact on methane emissions. It impacts how much methane is emitted, and it also is impacted by the methane that's emitted. So we want to support sustainable agriculture by providing, we're focusing a little bit on Canada, but we also want to inspire and collaborate with everyone else too. So we'll be providing local farmers with ways to reduce their methane footprint, and we'll be providing them with more sustainable technology that uses renewable resources. For landfills, organic waste in landfills produces a lot of methane. And by installing management systems to capture and destroy the methane emissions, we'll be greatly reducing the amount of methane that is emitted. And diverting organic waste, such as food waste, to compost instead will also be helpful because compost can also help with like gardening and agriculture. So it can kind of be a bit of a collaboration between the agriculture sector and landfills by providing them with some compost that they can use to improve their gardening stuff. And we'll also be supporting Canadian scientific research by funding and implementing innovative technology that can track methane emissions. We'll be working with scientific experts to analyze emissions, issues, and solutions. And a nonprofit public charity is the Environmental Research and Education Foundation of Canada. Sorry, I suppose I was covering everything this whole time. Okay, and yeah, so there's no planet B. Our planet is our responsibility. We're in a race to reduce methane, and if we get ready with these solutions, we'll be set and we can go. So save the planet and reduce methane. Thank you. Good questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
You said that you're going to be raising money.
Yes.
Right, through social media campaign. What's the funding model? Are people going to be donating money, or are you going to be seeking like donations from industry or like corporate partners? Like, what are you thinking there?
So it'll be a collaborative effort for us. So when we were saying that, like, we'll have influencers and social media, like content creators, things like that for it. A lot of them, they do things in groups. So it can kind of be, you can form your own little group where you guys are trying to raise money for the charity. We'll also be having some corporations who are also into who are also like motivated to help save the planet and stuff, so they can fund that as well. And it can also be on an individual level. A lot of celebrities too, they'll if they want to fund one, if it's something that they're very passionate about, then they can do that. And by doing that and posting about it, then their fans will see it, and we'll get some individual funding on that level as well. So it's on all levels. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed really wide swath of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself wondering at one point who you were, like not who you actually are,
Yeah.
but who are you presenting this to? Is this an idea of something are you presenting to the government to do this thing? In the beginning, it sounded like you were, sort of discussing ideas for a cool kind of startup that you might get private financing involved and have this really neat scavenger hunt idea, and then all of a sudden it seemed like you were the government and you were imposing carbon taxes and fines for that. So I'm kind of wondering how you kind of
we'll be like
yourself.
So we'll be like an organization where the social media campaign is one of the ways that we're raising awareness and funding for it, and we'll be working, in this imaginary world, we'll be working with the government and collaborating with them and encouraging them to make these changes and stuff. So that's why we're having a lot of people place pressure on them and spread awareness to it, so that they know that this is something that the world needs. Yeah,
so you're a smaller organization that's advocating for these government
policies. We're advocating for these government changes
and connecting to the larger community.
Yeah, so we're using the funding and the awareness and the pressure from our main social media campaign to collaborate with the government to for the funding, because a lot of reason why they will say no is because they don't have the money for it. So we're kind of solving those problems for them. Yeah.
So you're a lobbying group?
Yeah, I guess. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the clever strategy with respect to using content creators, social media personalities, and stuff like that. It has to be said, the solution never really falls squarely on those people's shoulders, and sometimes it can lead to things like slacktivism, clicktivism, and just using it for their own clout. And the example given Mr. Beast, I think it was last year, he tried to build 100 wells.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
Like in Cameroon, Kenya, Somalia.
Mm-hmm.
In less than a year, half of those wells were inoperable. Right? So it's great in terms of publicity, but translating it into a pragmatic exercise and then executing it is all the more challenging.
Yeah, I think there just needs to be ways that I think starting it can be a bit of the easy step that people see, but then actually maintaining it and having accountability measures for that is also important. So we'll be making sure that we keep that in that too.
Mind you, a lot of people who praised him said, well, these countries, their own governments were unable to do this. So he did come in at the right time, and we don't know what the motive was, but half of those wells are still working. So,
there is still a change for it, but also maintaining the rest of them would also have been really important. So I think making a change, but making sure that change keeps improving and improving is also very important for it. So yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Last but not least, we have Cam Solutions.
One of your teammates in the washroom?
Yes.
Okay, fine. We'll give you some.
Oh, I think she's not. Yes. Okay, no worries.
Feel better?
This is nice class.
They actually have fancy tech. That's what I said. I know. There's a lot going on over here. There's a lot.
What you see is amazing. I see it.
Recorded now.
Yeah.
It's good.
I noticed that.
Just scoping.
Oh my God.
Where we put the
That was
house.
beautiful. Here we go.
I'm like,
That's why I was wondering. You can do you can double the option. How does it do? Do you want to? Yeah, it's just like you don't have the option. I know I do like because in like this is like a lot of support lives these stuff like in the hiking trails. Yeah.
Wait, does it show our mouse? It won't show our mouse. Can you open the presentation?
How did they get Little Richard killed his first.
You just need to do something like it's the second one after the X. Yeah. Full screen.
You have to thank you. Sorry? And I just want to go get some.
Right.
No, but this whole weekend is just gonna be.
I know.
I'm gonna cry.
Wait,
Connect this. This has the poster on it. You can present
It was on
it.
Skype.
You can project the poster. I have the poster on it.
No, it's like
Let me hand these out. Hand these out first.
it's so bare. And like October is like, and then out of nowhere, 15 seconds. Oh, for your project, yeah. You like
Yes, please.
no, I was like hearing about that. It's like,
Thank you.
oh my
I
god.
know.
That's the easier one. Like,
I'm like, no, we would have done that for you. Next time.
you have to like start again the whole year.
Are we okay? Do you want to copy first?
And you like
Do you want to present this part or should I present this part? Which part? This part right here. Oh, his part? His part? How about you present that part and then I'll show her present? And what else did you do? Do we want to?
Oh, no, it's yeah, they have. Yeah, just for a reference. You can look at it.
Because like especially if you're taking classes,
Are we ready?
it'll be harder to
And we are canceled. Have staffers.
All right, ready when you are.
Okay. We are Camp Solutions. My name's Kinza.
And my name is Manal.
Oh, our group member Andy is not available with us right now. Yep. How do methane emissions affect us? Well, in past years, there have been floodings in Pakistan, where I am from. So is my teammate. In the floods in 2022, 1/3 of the population was submerged. And can I just? I'm so sorry. I just look at the data. Okay. Which caused 1/3 of the country in underwater, affecting 33 million people, half of which were children. This also caused damage to water systems and sewers, and due to the damaged water systems, 5.4 million people relied on contaminated water from.
We thought it was important to reflect on personal experience and something that has affected us, including, if you look over here, education was on hold for about 230,000 students. If you can imagine that happening anywhere else, and the government hasn't done anything. But they can't, because this has affected all kinds of parts of the world. This is only one example. Such as recently in Spain, there was floods. It has much of the land, and it has stopped a lot of the growth, labor, and anything else that has been caused there. So we did some research, and we found out where much of the emissions and carbon stems from. And we found some major countries like China, India, Iran, their fossil fuels, industrial revolution. I mean, they do so much for our world. They create so much, but it also leaves us with methane emissions, so many of them.
And due to these, a lot of cities in India, Pakistan, China, there's a lot of smog, which is harmful for respiratory problems, and this has also 773,000 hospital-related visits due to asthma and related problems.
So, what are the top 3 causes of methane emissions? We did some research, we found some graphs, and we thought it was important to share what covers most of methane emissions. Our number 1 we found was agriculture. It covers about 40% of methane emission with how it's operated. And these are recent case studies. I know we did have different data distributed amongst everyone, but this is what we found. On the second place, we had energy production and use. That was about 35% of methane emissions. And then waste management at 20% methane emissions.
Big question. How does agriculture relate to methane emissions? So we have done research, and we have created a poster, an infographic poster, and our solution is...
Apologize, it was supposed to be landscape.
It's supposed to be landscape, but we accidentally printed it in portrait. Our solution is farm to future, innovative solution for a greener future. We have some facts on here about agriculture, how many is facts about a single cow, which releases 100 to 200 kilograms of CO2 in a single year. Warming, and also other facts on here, warming potential of methane is 80 times greater than CO2 over the next 20 years. And we have done research, and we found out about enteric fermentation, which is the process of how cows digest food. So specifically when in farms and stuff, when a cow digests fibrous and plant materials, their digestive systems go digest these plant materials, and which is a current feed which is used is soybeans. This causes methane emissions, and a lot of methane emissions, as you can see, single cow releases a lot of CO2, and this causes. We have another solution, which is improving manure management.
Yeah. So agriculture significantly contributes to methane emissions with 2 primary pathways, as Kinzel has talked about. One of them was enteric fermentation in livestock, which obviously isn't just in cows, it's in sheep, goats,
other animals too. And the second one was manure management. So how that works is when animal manure decomposes, it causes conditions like it goes into lagoons, pits, and storage tanks, and it produces methane, which is obviously very harmful for our environment. And these conditions often occur in intensive farming, and operation manure is collected and stored, and then it's left to decompose. And it causes methane emissions, and obviously that builds up. The scale of this impact is the methane emissions depend on the manure storage system. Liquid-based systems like lagoons are particularly high emissions, and they're compared to solid systems like composting.
We have thought about a way of improving manure management. Cows eat, but they also excrete. We have thought about a solution where farmers can use their cow manure to reuse their cow manure for crop fertilization, which also reduces sources for farmers and methane.
So the solution in methane emissions we have thought of had a combination of technological, behavioral, and policy solutions. The first thing it would take would be an understanding of how this happens. Cows eat feed that has soybeans, and the soybeans, when they eat it, decomposed, obviously creates methane. Everything does. But our number one solution to that was that we induce additives like seaweeds, which can reduce methane.
And other fat alternatives in cow feed.
And these emissions from their digestive system alone is 80% of it, which would impact it quite a bit if we were to change their feed alone. Now, obviously, this won't solve the problem, but to solve the problem, we would need smaller solutions, which would take it away.
Okay. Alternative proteins, as we talked about, we could add alternative proteins, plant-based, more plant-based materials in cow feed. Talk about seaweed. We could use we could also talk about lab-grown meat for alternative for users and consumers. Grazing practices, we can improve soil and carbon sequestration and reduce over-reliance on high methane-producing livestock systems. Policy incentives, we have also thought about policy solutions. We have thought about incentives for low-emission livestock management, taking feedback from our judges. We have thought about a policy framework which would incentivize the use of the dog. Sorry. Okay, which subsidizing seaweed instead of soybeans. Seaweed is healthier, as we talked about, as a better alternative to the current feed, which is used today. It requires limited resources, limited water. It'd be easier to grow. It does not need the use of many fertilizers or pesticides. Seaweed is also considered a superfood for cows, and when cows are being eaten or given better feed, there will be better meat and
We'll be consuming better nutrition, obviously.
Yeah, for the health of the livestock as well. It benefits us since their meat will be much more nutritious. This will mitigate long-term issues for consumers and people who buy beef and dairy products. Are you doing this part? Okay, there we go. Okay.
Seaweed is a methane negative a crop, meaning it offsets more methane emission than it produces, which is what our goal is, to reduce methane emissions. And how it implements with subsidies. R&D research funding is given to universities and government fundings, which leads to improving farming methods and with selective breeding, such as breeding with seaweeds with specific traits that benefits health and longevity. And we can adapt more to harsher environments and also be resistant to diseases, which it proves to be much more better than the soybeans. And it is a potentially cheaper alternative if it's researched properly, obviously. It would need a deeper understanding of how to implement that into the feed. And as we develop, it is much better for USDA insurance policy for seaweed. We did check into some research, and if we did use seaweed, it would be better under USDA insurance policies rather than using soybeans. And then engineer and research proper farming systems designed are explicitly for seaweed.
And how we would implement this is petitions. We could start petitions, also create incentives for farmers and companies that use alternative cow feed and livestock feed for their animals. And we could also create, because currently we've done research and also with feedback of our judges. Currently, there are subsidies for certain companies that grow soybeans, and in turn, and reason why farmers are using soybeans in their livestock feed is because it is cheaper and it is also subsidized. So if we change the narrative towards and we subsidize greener solutions for seaweed and promote research with this, it would be greener for the environment and in turn with us.
And our solution would be divided into two different parts to address communities like farmers, local communities, people in general, to inform them about what's going on in the world, what the methane is doing to our environment, and how we can make better solutions with different feed. And we would be addressing larger companies, helping them understand how this is affecting our environment, obviously, helping them come up with more efficient solutions and potentially cheaper ones, which would help them in the long run. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? We are open to questions and comments.
Seaweed. I had no idea.
Seaweed, yeah.
That was a good room right here. I had no idea. Thank you. That's it. That was my comment.
Okay. Any more comments? Yes, Joseph.
Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on how it is that like feeding seaweed to a cow reduces the emissions?
Well, we obviously can't just give seaweed to a cow, you know.
Yeah.
We more logical would be maybe incorporating it into their current feed slowly, instead of just having all soybeans. Maybe we incorporate some seaweed and alternative fats as well. So that's also another more eco-friendly solution. What was your question again? Can you talk about
I just wonder, like,
Yeah.
what's the mechanism? Like, do you know?
In
why
the
is
production
seaweed
of soybeans,
used? Yeah.
so it's mostly just related to the production of the two different ones. When you're making feeds for cows, when you're comparing both, when it's subsidized with soybeans compared to seaweed, I think it's in the nutritious value, but it would be different in methane emissions and how they would excrete that.
Yeah, and
So it's more about the excretion and then the waste management later, where you would cut down on the methane emission.
also the production of soybeans that are current farmers that create soybeans for cow feed. They're also, I believe, they are also subsidized. Also, corn as well. That's the production of cow feed in specifically is also contributing to methane emissions. So that's why if we grow seaweed, less resources are needed, which is better for the environment. It's easy to grow, minimal water. It can be grown indoors in greenhouses. Yeah,
Great.
it's better for the environment instead of soybeans if we subsidize alternative solutions.
Okay, so it is 4:16.
Oh, it's 4:16.
So the judges are going to meet now. If all the contestants can stay in the room, we're going to try and really briefly talk to one another for maybe 15 minutes, 15 minutes. Then we can come back and announce.
That was so stressful, Joe. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank
So I
you.
was gonna take. I think this is it. Yeah, I took it from the library. Let's take it back.
This one is mine. Whose phone is this? Is this your phone? Is this your phone?
Yes.
Yes, this is your phone. Oh, it's the flower with his name, right? Right? Is